It is time once again to talk about Manor Lords. Hello again there, friends and fans. Raptor here. Welcome back to the channel for more news on this amazing medieval city builder with, of course, combat and so much more. More coming soon, by the way, as the developer has recently confirmed some things that we've been all asking for. And one thing you never know that what's going to happen with Manor Lords development is there are so many good ideas from the community and so many good ideas from Greg, the maker of this game, that you never know what the next thing will be to be put in. There's a lot of small things that could make huge differences, and a lot of big things that could make massive differences, and there's somewhat of a pseudo roadmap for this game as well. But we're going to talk all about the news for Manor Lords coming very soon for the next big update, and a few things that may have been already out for a little bit that I haven't covered since my last episode. So welcome aboard, and good to see you all here. Thanks again for subscribing to the channel. Welcome to all of you new members, and thanks again for leaving a like, letting YouTube know you want to see more medieval city builders, Manor Lords, combat games, or whatever else in your feed. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the big O news for Manor Lords. Let's go. So I think we'll start with the biggest piece of news that really inspired me to make this video for today: crossbows. New unit types coming in the next patch. Now, that doesn't mean just one type of crossbowman, but perhaps we could see a whole slew of different crossbowman type with different types of armor and possibly some other units that aren't shown in this little video here. This is looking clean. The animation for the crossbowman is really cool, and I love seeing them actually step down in order to reload the crossbow. Kind of reminds me of from Stronghold, when the crossbowman would actually kind of reel the crossbow in, and you would hear that kind of ratcheting noise whenever they'd get ready to fire, and it was always exciting right before, you know, the little moment between reload, aiming, and shooting, where there was a lot of tension that would build on the huge volleys that would come through. So, but regardless, yep, no surprise that the unit looks really good, but the animations are just killer, and they're holding it all in the accurate ways as well. And I'd love to see some militia units that perhaps are not holding it correctly, and perhaps we'll try to use those too. But yeah, very cool to see a new unit. They look great. The crossbow itself looks outstanding, and that means a new weapon type for us to sell too. Thinking about that, we're going to have to either import crossbows or possibly make them at the Fletcher, or combine some other parts together, more than likely some metal parts, and we'll have to see if some metal components can be made and then combined at the Fletcher in order to make that. That also means a new type of ammo. We'll have arrows for bows, but also bolts for crossbows, and this could also eventually open the door for seeing things like ballistas and large siege equipment. Now, of course, yeah, it's really easy to get excited and ask though, well, what if we're getting crossbows, what about drawbridges, what about huge walls, what about, you know, like literally building massive castles? Yeah, that's coming, of course. And yeah, every time I see something new on Manor Lords, it gets me excited for the next big thing we could see, at least in terms of combat. So really cool to see the unit. Looks outstanding, and I hope this also means that we get different armor types to make too in the future. Perhaps we could see leather jergens, or maybe other types of leather armor or equipment or gloves, or, you know, whatever. It'd be kind of cool to be able to have different types of things being made, not just for the citizens to use in order to live happier lives, but also for the military to somehow give them more protection, or to possibly complete the recipe. Maybe it's a requirement to complete the unit. Who knows? But yeah, so it's cool to see all these things officially put on the Manor Lords Twitter, which means you know damn well Greg's working on them, and they were just made a few days ago, so it could mean anywhere between almost finished to just an earlier concept. But one thing that I'm very excited to see, and going back on what I said earlier about making new equipment for crossbowmen, is fishing. Working on fishing ponds for the next update, since it was requested a lot. All right, now that means, are we going to see a new building for fishers? Are we going to see net making? Are we going to see boat making or docks? Are we also going to have to make fishing rods? There's a lot of questions that come in with that, but also another cool thing is that, yeah, it's another food type, so it makes it a lot easier to keep people happy by producing things like bread, fish, apples, carrots, or whatever from the burgage plots, the vegetables. It all goes together very well, but it really looks cool, and it's something that I really enjoyed for Farthest Frontier in the past, the ability to be able to build a bunch of little fishing areas around a lake. And even in that game, they don't necessarily have to use boats, they can just fish from the shore, but of course there's still going to have to be something done with the fish, and it makes me wonder, will we be able to smoke meats then in the future? Will we have maybe longer ways to preserve? I would love to see a building that specifically dries or smokes or salts fish or other meats and other foods that then makes them last longer. And creating a lot of variety is the first step in that, because then, of course, you have different foods that are available throughout the year, and then ones that are probably going to be the best in order to preserve for the winter, but then also to eat in those winter months too for calories. But yeah, so that means that we could see some gorgeous lakes in a rework of the map, and not just necessarily the I think there was a small stream that goes through there, so we'll have lakes that look gorgeous. We'll have the ability to get a new food type, and that means a new import or export for us all. So that's a good thing. And I would love to see a production chain that went down the way of Austria, for example. Austria, if you haven't heard of it, is a game that blew my mind even before Manor Lords from, I think, maybe 2015, 2016, or somewhere around there, but taking place in Ukraine and really showing a lot of what's in Manor Lords and Farthest Frontier, too, with insane crop rotation. But also, one of the coolest thing that blew my mind was the ability to build a boat house or whatnot, and then of course having to create metal parts to then give to those boat makers, things like nails and whatever for the oars, and then they make those boats, maintain those boats, and then the fishing dock is another building that has those workers. So I would love to see more buildings to build. Any excuse to build something new, I would love to see. I really like buildings in this game and watching them build the buildings. So just the small inclusion of a, hey, I'm working on fishing, opens a whole door to all sorts of different things. Yeah, it sure does. As I was looking around for more news, I found this, and it looked really hilarious, and I wanted to share it. It was back from early June after the Manor Lords early access sale, which they're doing from time to time. They're giving a 25% discount at random times throughout the early access period, which is really cool. And I think the game also may have been part of the Steam sale, but yeah, watching a lady just roll around face first in the dirt like that is quite comical. And it really makes me wonder what the hell happened. Like, what was Greg doing in order to make this a thing? Perhaps he was adding the ladies to the map or whatever. You have your lords where you can walk around in the third person, and maybe this was some sort of experiment. I have no idea. But what I love about the development of this game is at least Greg's not afraid to show all the things that are going wrong during the development. You could even see people kind of walking sideways and whatnot. Yeah, tweaking a 1 or a 2 here or there when you're doing something like that, I could imagine just creates all sorts of chaos. So it makes me wonder what else is going on behind these scenes and what other types of things will be coming down the line too. I don't know, more wagons and things like that. I don't know. See? Opening the gate. I'm just saying, this is really funny, and I just wanted to share it. It's old news, but it's hilarious. It's still funny. Now, something I found interesting from last month is that Greg confirmed that there was some sort of disease in the game in terms of a disease mechanic, but it's so light that he doesn't consider it to be a mechanic, but there is the ability for villagers to recover from getting sick, and they will stop working. But I never understood in the base game when it first came out in early access if that was actually working. Of course, we have the gatherer's hut that goes out and gathers a few things, including some things that could be used to cure our people, but there doesn't seem to be any desire or interest or really intention to go into plague and major diseases and have things like bathhouses that will try to prevent that, or quarantine zones. So Greg basically confirms that villagers now actually get sick, and this is from last month, and stop working, and herbs speed up their recovery, but most players don't notice it. And that's kind of true. That must have been tweaked around a little bit. I think a few other games that do that, I never really even noticed that they get sick. So you know, of course, you're like in, for example, Banished or Farthest Frontier, people do get sick, and you're supposed to essentially provide them with some sort of means to cure themselves or to heal. And especially like End Zone, A World Apart, that can become a very big problem if you don't take care of it over a long amount of time. But yeah, in Manor Lords, I've never even really noticed disease, but it would be interesting if there was some sort of post-combat recovery for some of our soldiers that would become wounded, and or maybe major injuries like a broken leg or something. That would not necessarily be a disease, but something that would need more of a physician. I think Farthest Frontier did a pretty good job of doing things like worms and different types of flus, and of course I think there's also the plague in there as well, but it doesn't have to go to that extreme in Manor Lords. It could just be a broken leg or smallpox or something like that, which again is it's a pox, it's a plague, whatever you want to call it. There would be something that would be good in there, but the way it is fine. If they added disease, if players wanted that, everybody was calling for that, and Greg put that in, that would be fine too. I think anybody who wants to see that, it's totally fine, and it'd actually be an interesting mod, but also one less thing to have to manage in terms of population at this moment is fine. This could be a decision that is changed later and or revisited, but yeah, there's not going to be any sort of real like building of a hospital or like a university to study diseases at this time and have cures come to your city. It's going to be kind of more of a quarantine at home type thing, and yet that wasn't even a thing. So when people get sick, they go home, and then when people are home, they'll do whatever it takes to feel better. So the herbs kind of make sense, and bringing it to another level would be okay. But yeah, take it or leave it. I had no idea. And it's kind of cool that it's actually confirmed that it's a working mechanic, but I'm not sure if it's working as intended yet, but there's certainly room to explore that in the future. There is no doubt in my mind that Manor Lords is probably the most visually impressive game I have ever seen, especially for a city builder. When you're playing Manor Lords and you zoom in and you see all the buildings and the people going about their day, and you can see rainwater accumulate in puddles, and then of course you zoom out a bit and see the trees and things swaying in the wind. And then when you zoom out even further and you look off into the distance outside the play area where you're not allowed to build or whatnot, and you just see volumetric fog and rain and beautiful sunlight and reflections off of some of the water that shows up in the game. There are rivers and things like that, and small little pools in those mud puddles I mentioned. Yeah, it's really crazy. Now, Greg has been toying around with some things in Unreal Engine 5, but I think the most important thing in this game is that, of course, the optimization is put first before graphics, and it looks like every time something new was added to Manor Lords, it was added and then optimized. There was no kind of, oh, fix it later. It seemed like there was the intent to add something and then to work double on making sure that it fit and was optimized with other parts of the game. Not only within the game's systems, but also the player's system. Your graphics card, CPUs, whether you're using a mega system or like something, I don't know, just kind of standard or midline. The intention here, I think, is to make sure that Manor Lords is the best experience for anybody and looks beautiful. And to be honest, I've toyed around with some of the settings to see how low it can go and what it'll look like at that level. And it's there certainly are some differences, but I mean, when a game looks this good, even on like low, where it looks just as good as, like, for example, Farthest Frontier or even Age of Empires 4, yeah, it's really impressive. Going back to what I mentioned about games like, for example, Farthest Frontier and also Ostriv. Ostriv was the first game that showed me seasonal transitions in a game. I mean, with really good detail in a realistic survival game. It's a survival city builder like Banished, but yeah, to be able to see the trees fall like that and look so good, it was really impressive. And the same with Farthest Frontier, which I have to give credit to, because you can actually see animals migrating for the winter in that game. Things like geese, birds, and whatnot will migrate out of your area wherever your city is built, and they'll go elsewhere for the winter. And I hope to see things like that in Manor Lords too, and or animal migrations over time naturally, which would be interesting. It would break the game a little bit for the way it is now, but I mean, Manor Lords, where it stands at the moment, is a huge wide open door for opportunity. And again, just going back to what I said about like looking at the roads, looking at the buildings, and if you go back and look at, for example, the initial trailers for the game, everything is like white and gray and sun bleached, and it looks good, but it looks so much better now. I mean, there's a little bit of life, a little bit of color in all these natural materials, and none of the buildings look drastically different, yet they do. They're not. It's not like you had 10 different people design 10 different medieval buildings of various sizes and whatnot. You could obviously tell it was made by one person. I mean, you could just see this from miles away. And yeah, so I'm really happy with the way the game looks, but even more happy that every time Greg wants to put something in, like those small fishing ponds that I mentioned for the next update, it's just going to look good. And if there's any sort of water effect where the water is actually kind of not necessarily stagnant, but if there's some sort of minor waves to it or motion of the ocean, for lack of better words, yeah, I'm sure it'll be optimized, and I'm sure it's going to look damn good. damn good. So, very excited for the next big update for Manor Lords, whenever it may be, whatever it may be, whatever is packaged together and seems to end up working the best for the next big update. I mean, every time there's even a small patch, it feels huge. Everybody gets excited and wants to know. But yeah, this video was basically a, hey guys, I heard some recent news, you guys have been telling me and I've seen it, and if you haven't heard about it, it seems to be quite big and very exciting. So hopefully we see a lot more between now and whenever the release date of the next big patch will be. Hopefully it'll be a major update that brings more optimization, although I'm pretty impressed with where the game is right now. Maybe new features that we haven't seen or even thought of, and then of course the crossbowmen, fishing, and then maybe some other things for weather effects that might affect things. Who knows? The sky is the limit when it comes to Manor Lords. That is for sure. That is definitely true. All right, guys, thanks again for subscribing to the channel. Thanks for hitting that like button. And if you know any more news about Manor Lords, if I missed anything, which I know I have because there's always news coming out about it, make sure you share it down below and ask any questions you may have, and we'll definitely try to get back to you about the game. Very excited to see more of it. Very excited to play this one again. We will be returning on the next update, and I'm not sure if we'll start over from scratch or if we'll build a city that we've already started upon and continue to conquer the map. But regardless, Manor Lords, damn good time. And if you've been on the fence about it, again, remember to wait for those like 25% off deals during early access. It's a real steal for a game that certainly is going to be a pinnacle of 2024, and that many people will look back on for sure for years to come. All right, thanks again for watching. Y'all have yourself a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye, everybody.